Let's work on balance. This is Open Mind Alexander Technique. I'm Jess. This is part of my exercise series that I'm doing here. One-legged balance, and how can we improve that over time, informed by Alexander Technique anatomy, knowledge, mechanics, and how do we direct ourselves while we're in activity. So this is something I've had to work on a lot. My balance used to be particularly awful for a few different medical reasons, so this is an area that I have sunk years of practice into getting to this point. And it's something that I've really enjoyed improving with, and I've decided to just continue improving, and I'm now past the point where most people would be able to match what I'm doing, which is cool and fun. So I'm going to go through exercises on for balance, and especially one leg balance or up on toes, in a way that will be structured for, like, here's your beginner stuff, here's your intermediate stuff, and here's the kind of things that I find challenging at this point. So just for starters, I want to point out that you absolutely are allowed to be right next to something to put your hand on. I happen to not have anything great at this correct height that I can put around me right now. I could use my drawers over there, but then I'd have to scoot the camera and everything, and I don't want to. So just know that it is totally fine and allowed, and there is no shame in having a railing. You can use the back of a chair. That works pretty well for this. Having your hand on the back of a chair, if you're really working and struggling with balance, is a great place to start. You might not even need to put much weight onto that or like really grab it much. I find that it's really helpful for my students who are struggling with balance issues to just have that kind of mental reassurance of, okay, there's something here, and if I'm going to fall, nothing terrible is going to happen because I have a hand on something. So that's really kind of more where this is. So for starters, as we're working with just basic balance, we're going to start with just shifting weight back and forth to the point that you can just start to feel your foot coming off the ground and then set it right back down again. As I'm going through this process, I'm going to really deliberately keep my spine neutral. This is harder than you might think, and if you're new to this, you struggle with balance, I would highly recommend you do this in front of a mirror or with like a camera pointing at you so where you can see yourself in real time. Like turn your phone on like selfie camera so you can watch yourself moving. That's going to tell you a lot of information. So things to look at, let me tuck my shirt in so you can see the line of my waistband. I want to keep my waistband level. Here's what I'm avoiding. The hip sticking out, and you see how this now is no longer level. Another thing you might see sometimes is people will go this way as they start to go to one side. I want to keep this all very stable. The reason that matters is it's going to impact my balance and my control over where my weight is over my leg. As soon as I start messing with this, now I've got weight on the outside of my knee, it feels weird, don't like it, and it's harder to balance. Also make sure you keep your eyes open. There are three main components to balance: inner ear, vision, and proprioception. So inner ear is the one that most people know about as far as like when you're feeling seasick or something. Oh, it's about your inner ear and all these different things. We tend to hear about that one a lot. That's only one of three. Your vision is also a major part of this. For an experiment on how we use vision as part of balance, try to stand on one foot with your eyes closed versus standing on one foot with your eyes open. Very, very different. So vision is part of that. Proprioception is your awareness of where your joints are in space. This is one that I happen to know a lot about because mine, as a person with hypermobility, was exceptionally terrible. The reason for that is the sensors and the way that our nerves work for judging proprioception and where we are in space, knowing where we are without having to look at where we are, those sensors are in our joints. So if our joints are unstable compared to each other, we're not going to be getting accurate information on where we are in space, and that needs to be trained over time to be able to figure out where am I in space and how can I improve my sensory processing of that. You can actually work on that. There are physical therapists who work with proprioception in particular, and so that's a useful avenue to go down if you struggle with this. It's also one of the reasons that it tends to be a little bit easier to know where our hands are in space, because we just have so many joints in here, and there's so many different areas for our brain to say, okay, I know where this is, I know where this is, I know where this is, I know where that is. We have a lot of information that comes in to our brains from our hands, not just from our sense of touch, but also our sense of proprioception internally, spatially, which is pretty cool. So if you're struggling with balance, and you're definitely at the beginner level with this, start there. Keeping your eyes open, keeping your core very level and stable. Now that does not mean tighten the hell out of it, because that's going to be harder to do. So a gentle, easeful release. Just because I'm minding where my belly is in space doesn't mean I have to suck it in. This can be a particularly hard one if you're wearing exercise clothes like I am. It has taken me many years to come to terms with the fact that my belly will take up more space than maybe other people's will if they are constantly sucking their bellies in, and they might look more like this from the side, and I look like this. And I'm allowed because I have organs, and that's where my organs go. So I'm deliberately letting go of my belly because that helps with my leg ease and balance from there. So I'm just going to go side to side, and again, if you want to have a hand on something, you're absolutely allowed. If you're going to have a hand on something, keep in mind that when you go away from that thing, you're going to have to let your arm extend out. So just make sure it's pretty close to you. If you're starting out here, you're not going to be able to get very far away. So keep an object you're railing quite close to you so that you can go back and forth. And then we're going to start to get to the point where you can fully lift your foot off the ground. Going very slow, staying very level. A good place to watch for this is your waistband of your clothes. Another thing you can watch if it's easier is like a hem of your shirt, if that's hanging down. We're avoiding sticking the hip out. We're just staying very stable. That's going to help a lot with balance. Now we're going to take this into circles. Forward-backward balance is something that a lot of folks don't work on, and I think it is underutilized, so this is something I have my students practice in lessons. We can do circles with this to accomplish both side-to-side and forward-backward balance. So what are our boundaries with this? If I go so far backward that not just my toes, but the balls of my feet can lift off the ground. So here's toes up, here's ball of the foot off the ground, so only my heel is in contact. If the balls of my feet can come off the ground, I am too far back for balance. So that's my backwards boundary there. As far as forward, if I can really easily lift my heels up and not change where my weight is, that's too far forward. So what that gives us is some reasonable boundaries, somewhere in between there. Keep in mind that as you're doing these weight shifts, your knees are your shock absorbers, your counterbalancing. Soft knees, soft hips, your whole self is available to help with this. It's harder to balance something that is inflexible versus something that can flex in various different ways and compensate for these weight shifts that you're doing. So from here, we're doing circles from the ankles, allowing the knees to be soft, allowing the hips to be soft. And then we can just pick a direction and stay there for a little bit and lift one foot up off the ground and put it back down again. And we can do another circle, staying very stable. That's why I've got my hands here to model. There's a lot of awareness going on here when you're first starting this. This is where my students tend to struggle with this, and this is where I struggled with this when I was first learning it. So when I get off to the side, being able to lift my foot and then put it back down. So that's our beginner level stuff. That's where I'd recommend you start if you are really struggling with balance and you're like, I need all the help I can get. Where do I start? Start with this. Side to side, circles, to the point where you're getting stability in these transition moments. It's not just about getting here and now what do I do? The way that you get there impacts how stable you're going to be while you're there. So let's say that you get to the point where we're going to call this kind of intermediate, medium level balance work. So all I've done here is I have shifted weight to one side to where I'm balanced on one leg, and then I've bent my knee to pick my foot up and out of the way. A few different things we can do from here. We can just stay here for a while. I find that my foot will start to cramp at around the 2-minute mark. That's where I'm at the moment. For you, it might be more like a 30-second mark, and that's fine. Again, I've put years into this. So just know that, if you need to adjust what you're doing and change your timing, that's totally fine. We can just stay on one foot for a while, make sure that you're alternating, make sure that in between you're maybe walking around a little bit, getting things moving as you're working on this. Again, totally fine to have a hand on something if you're going to be there for a while, and you can practice lifting the hand up, putting it back. Now we're going to look at variations on this process, and this is where things get interesting and fun, and it's the reason that I have put my yoga mat, which is already bunching up on me, diagonally, because we're going to use this diagonal space in a minute. So, where can we go from here? Well, the clear, obvious one for me with a background in performing arts and dance is heel lifts, going up onto releve and back down. Harder to do on one leg, and I have to really think about it. It's going to be a little bit easier if I have arms spread out towards the sides, because this is like when you watch people who are doing like tightrope walking, they have a big pole that kind of balances out all these little weight shifts over a longer space, a longer distance. It's also going to help with our arms. However, if you are lifting your arms by lifting your shoulders, that is counterproductive. It will not help your balance. So, asking your neck to release your shoulders first, and then letting your hands come up. I find it helpful to imagine that my hands are on something. I had years doing, dance training with a ballet bar right here, so that's where it is. This is the height, and we let the elbow be soft, and all the ballet things. I find that helps me to kind of find my balance as I'm working with this kind of stuff. Actually, that's the harder one. We should have talked about 2 legs first. So 2-leg heel lifts, again, if this is a hard one for you, having arms out or having a hand physically on something is totally fine. This also works really well if you're going to face a wall, have a wall in front of you and have your hands on that. That can be a really nice balance assist there. So for just heel lifts, coming up and staying on your toes. Well, toes. This is not on point. You're not actually on the toes themselves. This is ball of the foot plus toes. It's what we tend to think of as tiptoes, and this is where we're walking around like this. If I'm actually going to go up on my toes, I never got to the point with ballet of doing full point, but I've played around with it a little bit so I can go up onto sort of toes, but not full point. I don't hold that because my joints are not going to mess with that one. So I just work with going up into very stable heel lifts. This is an ankle challenge, and it's really helpful for ankle stability for those of us who roll our ankles really easily. Heel lifts at various different angles of feet forward, do 10 of those, feet moderately turned out, do 10 of those, and then feet really turned out and do 10 of those. This one obviously is a lot more from ballet world, but this is something that, for example, if you're doing a heels technique class in a form of dance that uses high-heeled shoes, you're gonna do a lot of these because you need that ankle stability. It's really important. So that's where I learned the multiple angles thing, was from a heels technique pole dance type class, pole fitness class. So that's a great one. Other things that you can do starts to get into the combination of yoga and balance. So I'm gonna face kind of diagonal here so you can get kind of a sense of how I'm moving from a diagonal view. If I go up onto one foot and then hold onto my back foot, arm is out front, and then we just increase all the angles here, this is called dancer pose. And I like it because I think it's pretty, and it's a great balance exercise. So we can do things like hold dancer pose for somewhere around 15-20 seconds. The thing that I struggle with that is my elbow doesn't like being at that level of extension. So sometimes an adaptation that I'll make if my elbow is struggling, which it was just then, I needed to come out of that position. If I go to a outside of the foot grip rather than inside of the foot. It changes the rotation of my arm, and then I can have a little bit of elbow bend so that my elbow isn't hyperextending or fighting hyperextending. And that can work fine there. Maybe it's not quite as pretty, but whatever. I've never done this on camera before, so I've never had to worry about whether it's pretty. So things like that are a good option. Another one that you can do, I guess this will be facing forward. I forget what this is called. It might be eagle. So basically, if we're starting with facing forward, crossing a leg where my ankle is just above my knee, and then letting the standing leg bend. It's kind of like sitting in a chair with your foot crossed over the opposite knee, but there's no chair. This is a great one for working with balance and also working with what's your balance like when your leg is bent. And then we can do, this is starting to get into difficulty territory for me, being able to work with rotation on top of that and not lose your balance. So I've got two different variables going on with that movement I just did. I have the leg itself that's in the air, and then I have my rotation all the way down to my ankle on my standing leg. Those are two separate variables, and I can work with both of them. So I can work with being in a low squat and work with, leg lifts out to the side or front or back. This is a great one for balance to do leg lifts. Side, front. So I will go through and do like a series of those. I timed it once and I was standing on one foot for about 2.5 minutes by the time I had done my full series of like various different leg lifts plus dancer plus that eagle thing, if that's the name of it. And at 2.5 minutes, my foot is really cramping and it's difficult and I need to not be in that anymore. So that's the challenge point for me and where I'm at. From there, you start really getting into dancer stuff, really. So things like being up on toes and then being able to do like lifts from there and having that be stable, being able to keep this balance while the other leg is moving, being able to go in and out of releve to flat that way. Those are all additional balance challenges. Other challenges you can add in is holding stuff. The more lopsided of a thing you're holding, the harder the balance will be. So you can really take that as far as you want to go with it. For starters, I would do something like hold something very central to your core, very close to your center of gravity, and then practice whatever balance exercise you want to do with that. So as you're working on balance, things to remember that your alignment has a big impact on how well you're able to balance. Your vision, your sense of where you are in space, all of these things are going to impact your ability to balance yourself. So if you're trying to work on your balance, whether you're at the beginner level, intermediate, or advanced level of balance work, you're still a human, you still have joints, and you still have the same, roughly same basic structure as most other humans. Some humans have, slight differences where, something will be proportioned differently, or maybe one thing is too short compared to the other. Various different stuff that can happen with the variability of humanness. But coming back to, all right, what's my organization of myself? My back is from about here to my ears. This whole thing is a unit. Keeping this as a unit and knowing that the movement point for doing interesting leg stuff while balancing is way down at my hip joints. It's not at my waist. My waist is my spine. That's going to stay really quite stable throughout working on balance. So I encourage you to give it a try and do something like maybe watch a YouTube video on Alexander technique while you're standing on one foot and see how long you can stay there. Or if you want to do something like set a timer for like once a minute to change sides, to really work with your endurance, being able to go in and out of those things. Those are all additional ways to work with your balance. So I hope this was a helpful look into balance improvement. I would love to hear how you all are working with this and using your balance as part of your daily lives.